Good afternoon. Welcome to Cool Springs. Today is Wednesday, October the 22nd, 2025, and this is our series, Life Lessons. I'll go ahead and tell you, you may hear some background noise. Our ladies group that meets every Wednesday for exercise and games and mission projects called Rise and Shine is just beyond the wall where our camera's operating from. And a minute ago, they were getting some of their exercise in by bouncing tennis balls. And before that, they were doing their stretching exercises, and I told them I could see how they might need to be demonstrating that some Sunday during the worship service, because when they were stretching and lifting their hands up and going from side to side, it did kind of look like a praise chorus. So if you hear background noise, it's the Rise and Shine group doing their exercises before they get down to their meeting and mission projects. Our life lesson today is basically the story of Ruth, and I've chosen to put this particular piece of our artwork. Our artist friend Bonnie commissioned that for the VBS that we've got coming up next year. And of course, the painting is based on Joseph and Mary carrying 40-day-old Jesus to the temple to be redeemed as a firstborn that opens the womb. And they will meet up with the senior citizens, Simeon and Anna. But it occurred to me that our artwork can be used for more than one Bible story. So today we're going to use it for the story of Ruth, because sometimes we can't see what God is doing in our lives while we're in the middle of troubled times, when we think things aren't going the way they should be going. And Ruth certainly experienced that. Her mother-in-law, Naomi, and Naomi's husband, Elimelech, experienced a famine in Israel about 1,200 years before Christ. Famine was so bad throughout the entire area that they didn't have anybody else to rely on, because all their neighbors and family and friends, people who would otherwise help them out in a time of trouble, weren't able to help because they're all suffering from this famine. As it turns out right now, because these are life lessons, right now here in the 21st century, here in our country, the federal government is shut down because Congress hasn't come to an agreement on a budget. And a lot of people who work for the federal government are laid off right now. And some people who are considered essential, like all the soldiers out at the military base that's just a few miles here in our area, the soldiers and the civilians who are considered essential workers, by law, they have to report for work anyway, but they're not going to get paid. And so it's a situation where a lot of people are in crisis. But you see, here in the 21st century, when we have civilians and soldiers who are in need because of a temporary situation, there are other people in our area who aren't affected by the shutdown. And so a lot of people have been sharing discount places and extra resources, and a lot of local charities have stepped up where people are donating extra food to, say, the food banks and the food pantries to help people get through this temporary rough spot. Well, in Naomi's day, because everybody in the community was suffering from the severe drought and famine, there was nobody to help. So they had no choice but to try to move to a place where there wasn't famine and drought. And Naomi and her husband moved to the land of Moab with their two sons, where their sons are going to wind up, they're going to stay there for a while. The sons are going to wind up marrying local girls. And the father, Elimelech, and both sons are going to die in Moab. Then Naomi hears that the famine is over with back in her land, and she wants to go home. But she's got two daughters-in-law who are local Moabite girls. And Naomi thinks, well, without my husband and without my sons, I don't have anything to offer these daughters-in-law in way of hope for the future. So she encourages them to go back to their own family's home. And one of them does so. But the other one, Ruth, decides, no, if I do that, you're going to go back home alone. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to stay with you no matter what. So Ruth is the one who tells her mother-in-law, wherever you go, that's where I'm going to go. Wherever you live, that's where I'm going to live. Wherever you die and be buried, that's where I'll die and be buried. Your people are going to be my people, and your God's going to be my God. Ruth is making a lifetime commitment to her mother-in-law. And so she and Naomi will return to the land of Naomi's birth. And sure enough, the old homestead is there. Naomi can go reclaim her old family home, but food's got to be put on the table. And Ruth is the one who suggests to her mother-in-law, I know what the local custom is, that in your country you set aside part of the field to let the poor people go and gather. Let me go out there and go to work just so we can have something to eat. And of course Ruth is going to do that. Naomi's going to tell her, yes, that's the right thing to do. And the very first day that Ruth is in the fields, she just happens to land in a field belonging to one of her late husband's relatives. And so Ruth gets a little bit bold, and she asks the foreman. She knows that people are allowed to glean on the corners of the field if they're poor and hungry, but she asks the foreman for permission to be right in the center of the field. You see, all that Ruth can see right then is that I'm now in a new country. I'm taking care of my mother-in-law, and as far as she knows, she's just going to be taking care of her mama-in-law for the rest of her life. She can't see what God's got for the future. But over the course of several months, as they go through both the wheat and the barley harvest season, Ruth just gets up every day, goes to work, comes back with food, stays with her mother-in-law, and they fix the food and they live there in the house. The end of the harvest season, Naomi is now able to see that, yeah, Ruth meant business. She's not going to leave me. But Naomi also sees Ruth's my daughter-in-law. She's a lot younger than I am. When the day comes that something happens to me, I need to do something to take care of her, because she'll be all alone. This is my country, but it's not her native country. And so Naomi comes up with a plan and tells Ruth what to do to help Ruth find another husband. That husband is going to be Boaz, a relative of Naomi's. Boaz and Ruth will get married, and they'll have a child, Obed, who'll be considered Naomi's grandchild and will be considered the heir of all of her husband and son's estate. And he'll grow up to take care of Naomi in her old age, and he'll have a son of his own, Jesse, who'll grow up to have many sons, one of whom is named David. And centuries later, one of David's descendants will be a girl from Nazareth called Mary, and God will choose her to be the mother of the Messiah. You see, when we have this little picture over here of a baby being welcomed by several people, we'll let that represent the village of Bethlehem, where Ruth had gone to live. They were celebrating the birth of Ruth and Boaz's son, Obed. Not only could Naomi not see the future, she just knew that she wanted to take care of her daughter-in-law. Ruth couldn't see the whole future. She was just there to take care of her mother-in-law, and she obeyed her mother-in-law's instructions, and she wound up with a precious child to grow up with and to love and to cherish and to raise to manhood, her son Obed. But even Ruth couldn't see the whole future, that 14 generations after King David, and Ruth is 4 generations from David, that there would be Mary, represented by our Christmas artwork here, and her husband Joseph, who is going to be the adoptive father of the Christ child. They couldn't see God's whole plan. They saw the baby in Bethlehem as being Naomi's heir, and they saw that God was being good to Naomi and to Ruth. But they couldn't see the whole plan of God, that would lead to that promised Messiah that would save them and all of their descendants if people put their faith and trust in Christ. Sometimes when you and I are going through a difficult time, we can't see the whole story. But like Ruth and Naomi, we need to trust God with the plan. And ultimately, Ruth saw part of the plan come true. Naomi saw part of the plan. They saw that God provided for both Naomi and Ruth to have a home, to have food on the table, to have relatives who were looking out for them in their old age. They saw Obed grow up and become a man and carry on the family legacy and take care of the family property. But they couldn't see generations into the future. They had no way of knowing that God was going to use their little family to bring about the salvation of the world. So whenever you're discouraged and you're wondering what's going on and you can't really see the plan and you start to get frustrated or discouraged or any number of human emotions, remember, trust God. He can see what you can't. Thanks for watching.